Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be a double upload with the best wildcard squad for Game Week 9, and on Monday I did a triple upload for UCL Fantasy, so you've got all the ultimate coverage for both fantasy formats until the end of the season. You can see my predicted scorelines on screen, and towards the end of this video I'll be showing you the top 10 captains for Game Week 9. On Friday night I'm going for Leeds 2, West Ham 1, and in the early kickoff on Saturday, Chelsea 3, Sunderland 1, Newcastle 2, Fulham 0, Manchester United 1, Brighton 1, Brentford 0, Liverpool 1, Arsenal 2, Crystal Palace 1, Aston Villa 1, Manchester City 1, Bournemouth 2, Nottingham Forest 0, Wolves 1, Burnley 0, and Everton 2, Tottenham Hotspur 2. Those are my scoreline predictions, which are subject to change. I'll be showing you the final versions in tomorrow's deadline stream, so don't be caught out by that Friday deadline, and keep your eyes peeled for a reaction stream on Saturday. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also the notification bell so you're always up to date on my content, both UCL Fantasy and FPL, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, further access to my videos, amongst many other perks, my Discord server, the FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast, it also helps me out even further. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. After Semenyo's price rise overnight to 8.1 million, my squad value is now 100.8 million overall, with 0.7 in the bank. The spending power will be different, but I'll be talking about my starting 11 and the captaincy later on, and a few alternatives you could consider in every single position. I'll start off with the two goalkeepers, and this is quite stable, so there won't be massive changes in this position, but that will be the case in the outfield areas, as you'll see later on. There are several shot stoppers to consider, like Roofs from Sunderland, but their fixtures are quite poor. I think Robert Sanchez might appeal to some managers because he only costs 4.9 million, and it's a nice entry point into that Chelsea defence. But my favourite goalkeepers would be David Raya and Nick Pope, and ultimately Raya would be the preference to double up on the Arsenal defence, who kept another clean sheet against Atletico Madrid in a 4-0 win on Tuesday night, and across 11 games across all competitions, Arsenal have conceded 3 times in that spell, and they're also keeping multiple clean sheets against some of the biggest and best clubs in the country, and they're looking so solid. The underlying stats are also incredible. They're barely conceding shots on target, let alone goals, so David Raya is worth 5.7 million. The backup would be Martin Dubravka. This speaks for itself. He's template. He's the only 4 million goalkeeper who will start long term, and I think Perry could start for Leeds United on Friday night against West Ham, and you'll see my predicted lineups in the deadline stream tomorrow. But ultimately, even if Darlow gets another shot, I don't think that'll be sustainable in the long term, and Dubravka produced 9 points in Game Week 8, and I started him over Robert Sanchez. So this is all you need in the goalkeeper position. Raya with Dubravka, but if you want to go a little bit cheaper, then Nick Pope would be a decent option to cover that Newcastle defence, which I would recommend doing in one way, shape or form, either with someone like Dan Burn in this defensive line or Nick Pope between the sticks. But if you were to double up on any defence in the Premier League, it has to be Arsenal, especially with their upcoming fixtures. Gabriel cost 6.4 million in FPL after a price rise several days ago. He scored and assisted against Atletico Madrid, and he's the highest scoring centre-back since 2020 across Europe's top 5 leagues. So Gabriel is an incredible athlete and one of the best central defenders in world football. He gets attacking returns, and against Fulham, he provided an assist despite not having his best game, and got maximum bonus points, producing 12 overall. In the previous game week, he got 9 against West Ham after securing DEFCON and also a bonus point. And guess what? Against Newcastle, maximum bonus points and the winner in the dying embers of that game. So Gabriel is clutch, fixture proof. There could be rotation on the odd occasion for all Arsenal defenders, but I think Gabriel and Saliba are the least likely over the course of the season, and they'll still start over 30 Premier League games. But you could see against Burnley away, for example, Hincapie get a start over one of Calafiori or Gabriel, and see Arsenal rotate a little bit and still get the job done. So I think Gabriel is going to be the safest, also the one with the highest ceiling. He's getting DEFCON, and whilst there will be the odd rotation, I can't guarantee he's going to start every single Premier League game. I still think he's safer than the other Arsenal defenders, particularly Calafiori, who was benched against Atletico Madrid, and that's twice in a row now in the Champions League. And Ben White could get the odd start over Jurriën Timber. That will be more frequent than Hincapie over Gabriel. But the second defender costs 5 million, and he's a DEFCON machine in Marcus Senesi, who has kind of mixed fixtures over the next 5. There is Aston Villa and Man City away over the next 3 game weeks, but you've also got Nottingham Forest at home coming up, and we'll see how they perform under Sean Dyche, and there are some promising fixtures afterwards where I think Senesi could get either a clean sheet or secure DEFCON. So I do like the Argentine still, and he's definitely a hold for those that have him. I think for those that kind of missed out on the points and returns and you're not wildcarding this week, you might be tempted to go elsewhere. And in my team selection, I highlight 2 defenders that could bolster my defensive line this week. Marcus Senesi was one of them, and Dan Burn was the other. I would definitely cover Newcastle defensively with either Nick Pope in goal or Dan Burn. You've also got Botman and a few other options like Trippier, who will be decent until Livramento is back from injury, but that will likely take place in November. So if you want a longer term punt and someone very solid who can get DEFCON and the odd goal, I think Dan Burn is the way to go at 5.1 million, and ultimately this wouldn't be spending too much money in this position. Now, there is no Crystal Palace defender at the moment, and from Game Week 10 onwards, I would definitely recommend 1 or 2 Palace players overall, either Mateta up front, Ismail Assar in the midfield, and you've got plenty of options in that defensive line, but my favourites will be Munoz or Richards. I've got Lacroix personally. He has been very underwhelming. Mark Gay is still very decent at his price point, and he's getting a few assists and goals here and there. And Tarek Mitchell isn't too shabby, but he's the most likely to drop out with rotation in mind. And Borna Sosa could get the odd start in the Premier League. So definitely bear that in mind. Munoz could be a great transfer in for Bedra Botta, for example. That's something I'm considering for my FPL setup. But there are 2 spots left in this position, and Mukiele will fill it up. You can go for any 4 to 4.1 million defender like Rodon, Alderete, Mukiele and Goodmanson, and ultimately the cheapest of those options would be Goodmanson at 4 million, and Leeds have better fixtures than Sunderland, so you could definitely go for him. And for those that maybe would point towards a Stev or a Burnley defender, you've already got Dubravka between the sticks, and ultimately that could still work out, but I'm not a big fan of doubling up on the Clarets defensively. You wouldn't really be doubling up very often, only when they have a plum fixture, and you could argue Wolves away is one of them, but I'd rather go for a Sunderland or Leeds defender and have Dubravka as the only Burnley defensive coverage that you need. But the last option is from Chelsea to cover their upcoming fixtures, which are very promising. They are top of the fixture difficulty rating up until Game Week 13, and Arsenal are just behind them. And Chalobah seems to be the most nailed on in the Premier League. He got a rest in the Champions League as Chelsea beat Ajax 5-1. And you've also got Achimpong at 3.9 million. He could be very appealing for some people, and maybe instead of Mukiele or these budget defenders, you go for Achimpong as that sort of 5th defender. That could also work out quite well, and it also allows you to get extra funds to then buy Daniel Munoz in this defensive line. Many FPL managers are tempted to triple up on the Arsenal defence, which leaves no space for the likes of Bukayo Saka, Victor Gyökeres or any other Arsenal attacker. My preference has always been a double up in the Arsenal defence and 1 attacker, with Saka being the best option overall. But Victor Gyökeres scored a brace and won player of the match against Atletico Madrid. Saka got no goal contributions, and that was the case against Fulham as well, but he secured 7 points in Game Week 8 because of DEFCON, defensive contributions, and got 2 bonus points for his efforts. He had an incredible game. He created 7 chances and 1 big opportunity, and I think Bukayo Saka was quite unfortunate not to walk away with an attack in return, but he'll get the most goal contributions of those Arsenal attackers alongside Victor Gyökeres. I think if the Gunners have another penalty, Gyökeres will take the next one, but they'll probably share them in between, and a lot will depend on the context, if it's a home or away match, and which player might need the goal a little bit more. But ultimately, Arsenal have some reliable penalty takers. Gyökeres is the best of them all, but Saka has the creativity, both from the set pieces and open play, and he's worth 10 million overall. He's got that consistency, which many midfielders are lacking in FPL nowadays, but that isn't the case for Antoine Semenyo, who has gone up to 8.1 million for a reason from his baseline price of 7 million at the start of the season. Despite frustrating managers in Game Week 8, he only got 1 assist and a booking to produce 4 points overall. He's still got something on the board, and Semenyo's going to be very consistent over the course of the season. This is something he struggled with in the previous campaign, where he did really well against the top teams, but then in these plum fixtures, he kind of disappointed managers. I would have been quite keen on captaining him against Nottingham Forest if Ange Postecoglou was still at the club. With Sean Dyche now at the helm and a potential managerial bounce, that would put me off, and you need a great reason to go against the Norwegian robot with the captaincy. But there is still an opportunity to do so in Game Weeks 9, 10 and 11 arguably. I don't think Haaland will be as much of a standout for the captaincy as he was in previous weeks, but Semenyo will be one of the few who can rival him in the long term. Let's now go to the other midfielders here, and this has been a very reliable option for me at 6.5 million in Ndai with defensive contributions on a regular basis. He's on penalties, scoring at a decent rate from open play, and he's creating chances for his teammates. He has 13 key passes, 3 big chances created, and 3 big chances himself. But against Man City, Ndai played very well, created a huge opportunity for Beto, and he absolutely scuffed it. So I think the quality surrounding Ndai, at least in terms of finishing, is still quite poor. With Jack Grealish coming back now, and he isn't eligible to play, of course, in Gameweek 9, I think that's going to be a massive boost for the Toffees, and they link up very well in Ndai and Grealish. That's something I talked about before the season even started. So I'm very happy with Ndai. We've got plenty of options at 6.5 million. That includes Ismaila Sarr, who plays Arsenal away this week, but Crystal Palace's long-term fixtures are very encouraging, and from Gameweek 10 to 14, they'll be right up there in the FDR. But there's also another 6.5 million midfielder that I'd recommend, and that's Enzo Fernandez. My only concern with this pick is that with Delap potentially available very soon, we could see Enzo Fernandez play deeper as he did against Ajax. He scored a penalty and was subbed up for half-time, but I think that was already planned. And with Chelsea having virtually won the game by that stage already, they could have taken Enzo Fernandez off and make substitutions and use their squad depth very well. But if you had to pick only one of these 6.5 million midfielders, I'd probably take a punt on Enzo Fernandez this week against Sunderland. But in the long term, I just like Ismaila Sarr's consistency, the fixture-proof nature of him, and you might be tempted to go for Jean-Philippe Mateta instead to cover that Palace attack after that hat-trick against Bournemouth. But I still think Sarr offers better value in the long term, but Mateta's stats are incredible, which I dissected in that Transfers podcast very recently. But I do like the mix of this midfield 5. There are no budget options, essentially. You've got 4 mid-price choices and a premium in Bukayo Saka, and it gives you flexibility, so you can switch to a Bruno Fernandes when possible, and maybe other decent choices at 6.5 million and below. That includes Moises Caicedo, Granit Xhaka, who will tick along nicely and deliver 3-4 points on a regular basis, and you could still go for a Liverpool midfielder when they come good, and Cody Gakpo has been the most in form in the last couple of game weeks. Let's now go on to the 3 forwards, where things are very interesting. I have to go for a budget option, though, to facilitate for this somewhat expensive midfield, but I think it's certainly worth it with the consistency and the sheer output from these players. Igor Thiago is third in terms of FPL points scored amongst forwards, and this is the first time this season that he features in a best wildcard squad. But I've talked about 6 forwards that stand out above the rest in my recent videos, and that hasn't changed too much. Erling Haaland is the obvious standout, but you've also got Victor Gyökeres, who I think will come good for Arsenal in the Premier League, and he showed signs of that against Atletico Madrid with an all-round performance. Joao Pedro has promising fixtures up until Gameweek 13. I certainly wouldn't be selling him if you do have him in your FPL setup. Jarrod Bowen is a bit of a difficult one because West Ham looks so shambolic that I can understand if you wanted to pull the trigger, but I still think Bowen is worth keeping against Leeds at least. Then you've got the likes of Voltemada, who is currently the second best or maybe third best FPL forward in the game, and you've also got a few others where that came from, like Jean-Philippe Mateta, who has the best stats of them all, with the exception of Erling Haaland. Igor Thiago scored against West Ham, missed a few big opportunities and had a goal disallowed, but I think Thiago is the best Brentford asset, and he only costs 6.1 million. Their fixtures aren't particularly great, but Liverpool at home is still quite decent for an attacker, and they look vulnerable defensively, especially from aerial situations, which Arne Slot said in his press conference. So I think Igor Thiago is a good FPL pick overall. And Erling Haaland is the best FPL option in general. We all know this. And despite Man City having a really tough run on paper, I still think they'll pick up some results, score plenty of goals, and Erling Haaland will score the bulk of them. And their second top scorer in the Premier League is Esteve with 2 own goals in that 5-1 game for Man City back in Gameweek 6. But I think Erling Haaland against Aston Villa away is still the best captaincy option, arguably, even though he's not maybe the clear favourite as he would have been in previous game weeks. But his form is remarkable, even against Villarreal where he scored. That was a little bit disappointing. We wanted 2 or 3 goals from him in UCL Fantasy, but he did the job, and that's all you can ask for. Erling Haaland is scoring goals and winning Man City plenty of football matches, so you can't really complain from that perspective. But the last player is Nick Voltemada, who cost 7.4 million. He has attracted a lot of FPL interest, but I'm glad to have bought him when he was a differential, and I could see him rising in price even further, and his ownership will be 20% very soon. He is a clear purchase in Fantasy Premier League and also fixture-proof. He has disappointed in the Champions League, where Anthony Gordon has been the standout, but in FPL, the only Newcastle attacker I'd be considering is Nick Voltemada. I think Gordon is decent and you could consider him if you want that sort of mid-price midfielder, but not at the expense of Ndai, Ismail Assar, or Enzo Fernandez. So that completes the 50-man squad for the Gameweek 9 wildcard. Let's now go to the website, FPL.team, and I'll present the starting 11, talk about the captaincy, and a few other alternatives you could consider. Despite a challenging fixture against Crystal Palace at home, I would consider doubling up on the Arsenal defence with David Raya and Gabriel. Chalobah will be facing Sunderland at home. The same goes for Enzo Fernandez, who is no longer yellow flagged. Marcus Senesi and Semenyo completes a Bournemouth double up against Nottingham Forest at home. Ndai has a decent fixture against Tottenham, who have the best away record in the Premier League so far this season, but they were battered by Monaco and walked away with a 0-0 draw thanks to Vicario, who made 8 saves and won the Player of the Match award in UCL Fantasy. Bukayo Saka completes the triple up for Arsenal against Crystal Palace, and Nick Voltemada is also at home against Fulham. Igor Thiago is up against Liverpool, and that's another home fixture. And Erling Haaland, despite being away, takes the armband. And on the bench, there's Dubravka away to Wolves, Ismail Assar facing Arsenal. Dan Burn could also be started in this sort of setup, and maybe over Igor Thiago if you're not fancying Brentford to score against Liverpool. And also Mukiele away to Chelsea. So you've got plenty of squad depth with this setup. And as I mentioned before, something you could consider is Mukiele to Achimpong, and then upgrading Chalobah to Daniel Munoz. And if you were to do that, I think Munoz isn't the type of player you want to bench, even in a fixture like Arsenal away, but I'd be tempted to start Dan Burn in that circumstance. And with my funds, I'd only have 0.3 million in the bank. So that's when Nick Pope in for Raya could also work out for you, or bringing in Jurrien Timber or a different Arsenal defender for Gabriel to find the extra millions you need for this setup. You might even want to go from Thiago to a cheaper forward, or do something along those lines to make this work to your way. And ultimately, if I had to make one other move to bring in Achimpong, who to be fair would probably start in this team anyway, even over Dan Burn, I'd probably do something like this and go from Dan Burn to a cheaper defender, and then Raya to Nick Pope. I think that's a few other alternatives you could consider. So there you go, you got 0.2 million in the bank, and ultimately with Newcastle, you can double up on them. I don't think it's a terrible idea, but I'd rather do that with the Gunners. And remember, with Crystal Palace, Daniel Munoz is the most expensive. You can also cover them with Richards, who offers the best value at 4.5 million. You've also got Mark Gay for a little bit more, and he's got more goals and assist potential. And Lacroix is still decent, but I do rank him lower than the other Palace defenders at this moment in time. He certainly needs to improve. He has been quite disappointing since I signed him a couple of months ago, but let's actually go for a little downgrade here, and Dan Burn could make way here. It's not absolutely necessary. I still rate Dan Burn as an asset, and ultimately, if you're covering Newcastle defensively, I would argue he's still slightly better than Nick Pope, but that is certainly debatable. And then, if you wanted to go for Jurrien Timber as well, what I'd probably do is downgrade Enzo Fernandez, Ndai, or Sarr. Maybe downgrade one of those options to then get the rest of the 50-man squad intact. So in this case, I'd probably do something like this. Ndai downgraded. And if you go to Granit Xhaka or Caicedo, you've got plenty of money in the bank, and that could also work in your favour. And then you can start Timber and double up on the Arsenal defence that way with a 4-3-3. There is a big debate this season about taking money away from your forwards and investing it into the midfield and defenders, but there aren't too many standout midfielders anyway. So if anything, I'd probably start taking out money in the midfield for those that are really struggling for that consistency. I do like Enzo Fernandez though, Ismail Assar, Semenyo, Saka. I think they're all worth the investment. Bruno Fernandes is still fine. I don't think he's a must sell, even though he can be very frustrating on the odd occasion. But let me know your thoughts down the comment section below. These are just alternative picks, remember. The main wildcard squad was discussed throughout most of this podcast, and that is what I'd ultimately go towards with the wildcard chip this week. And if you have seen my previous podcast, there's a bit of a different structure with a more expensive forward than Igor Thiago, and that could include Jean-Philippe Mateta, Jerry Bowen, or Joao Pedro instead, and that would mean downgrading one or two other players, particularly in that midfield, and it could even happen in the defensive line as well. But the safest Chelsea defender to go for is Chalobah. He is the most secure Chelsea defender apart from Cucurella, who would be the standout, but he's also the most expensive at 6.1 million. With Achimpong, I believe he'll start against Sunderland, but in the long run, you can't really trust him to start week in, week out. And even at that price point, you'd just rather have a defender who plays every single game, like Alderete, Mukiele, Rodon, or Gudmundsson, and they can come in when needed, especially in the winter period where you have such a congested fixture schedule. So I would stick to this sort of wildcard structure I discussed for most of this podcast. The expected points is 62.3. If you want to go for a Mateta, Bowen, Joao Pedro, Gyökeres, you have to make some downgrades in the midfield, and that could certainly be possible. So refer back to those previous wildcard podcasts, and I'll be doing it for every single game week until the end of the season. I'll also do the odd best free hit squad with plenty of transfer tips, team selections, and deadline streams along the way. To cap things off, I'll highlight the top 10 captains for Game Week 9. In 10th place, I've still got Jarrod Bowen, despite his very poor underlying numbers, and Leeds would be the favourites to win that game against West Ham on Friday night. Indai is 9th against Tottenham. He's not going to get many big returns, but he's so consistent and he has different avenues towards points. Joao Pedro is 8th after serving that suspension in the Champions League. He got a full rest against Ajax and he's going to play against Sunderland. He's going to start there, and even as an attacking midfielder, I would argue he's even better as an FPL asset, and he could be on penalties with Cole Palmer still injured up until November. Enzo Fernandez is 7th though, and he took a penalty against Ajax in that 5-1 win. Voltemada is 6th, and he would be the second choice penalty taker, despite having a great effort, of course, against Nottingham Forest a couple of weeks ago. Bruno Fernandes is yet another penalty taker, just like Saka and Salah, who narrowly miss out on the top two, but I think that's the order I would go about things. So Fernandes, with a brilliant record against Brighton, is 5th. Saka against Crystal Palace is narrowly ahead, but I don't think the upside is probably enough to do Bruno Fernandes to Saka this week. But Salah is still in the top 3 despite a very poor start to the season, and Liverpool found a winning formula and they benched Salah to begin with in that 5-1 win against Frankfurt. And Antoine Semenyo is 2nd. He might have been 1st if he was facing an Ange Postecoglou Nottingham Forest side, but it will be Sean Dyche at the helm instead. So that's why Erling Haaland remains top by default because of his form, and even against Aston Villa away, he is still the number 1 option on paper, but this could change by tomorrow's deadline stream with the final top 10 captains, updated clean sheet odds, and all the graphics, team news, and injury updates you need, so you're well prepared for Game Week 9. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also the notification bell so always up to date with my content, both FPL and UCL Fantasy. Let's get this video to over 100 likes, and let's keep on pushing towards new goals like 37 subscribers. Follow me on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the Championships, for access to my videos, amongst many other perks. My Discord server, the FPL League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you tomorrow for the Game Week 9 deadline stream, and on Saturday, the plan is to do yet another reaction stream for Fantasy Premier League.